Hi, I'm Amanda Dubberly, Assistant Curator and Academic Liaison at the William Benton Museum of Art, and I'm thrilled to introduce Chris Sancomb. Chris Sancomb has a hybrid practice in design and studio arts that explores the intersections of art and science through a wide range of media. His design practice has focused on the creation of STEAM-related informal learning environments for science and children's museums. His work in these areas centers on designing hands-on interactive learning experiences from concept development to implementation. Central to his design practice is the belief in creating inclusive, self-directed, experiential environments designed to support varied learning styles, promote empathy, and help develop creative confidence in children. Chris is Assistant Professor of Art in Industrial Design in the Department of Art and Art History at UConn, and his talk today will be followed by a Q&A with Shelby Charlesworth, an MFA student in studio art at UConn. Thanks so much to Chris and Shelby.
Hi there. This is Chris Sancomb, Professor of Industrial Design in the Department of Art and Art History. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my work. I want to start by thanking Amanda and the folks at the Benton Museum for inviting us to do these talks and for hosting such a wonderful faculty exhibition. I'm going to run through some images of my work and then take you on a little bit of a studio tour. So thank you for coming, and here we go. My creative practice has been divided into two sort of parallel disciplines between industrial design or exhibition design and studio arts. The two coexist professionally and personally, and they sort of mingle and overlap sometimes with shared or divergent modes of thinking that come into play in each area. The thing that I think that separates them is intention. With the intention of the work, how do I want to engage a viewer or audience? How much of their experience do I want to control or shape? What do I want them to come away with from this experience? My design practice is largely centered around museum exhibition design, the design of hands-on, interactive museum environments that include not only the space design, but the design of everything in the space, the furniture, the lighting, even the handheld objects that visitors engage with. These environments are designed to shape and direct a visitor's experience as they move through a space and to cultivate learning through hands-on engagement and social interaction. As the designer, I use architectural cues to create environments that are intuitive to navigate and visually and formally inspiring. I work to shape the mood of a space, create an invitation or entry point that can facilitate the social or the intimate, be bright and loud or quiet and subdued, and meet the visitor's needs as they travel through this environment that is specifically designed for experiential learning. I look to create social opportunities to collaborate with visitors and with new people and have them creating and collaborating with each other. Uh, I like to create intimate interactions in these spaces to make it so the visitors can think and explore. Uh, I look to design the environment and then set it free for folks to use it as they will. These are collaborative spaces, and I'm collaborating with my visitors. This is an us space, a space where the viewer is active and I become passive and recede out of the space once it is activated by visitors. The visitors take over, and I watch and understand and learn a little bit more about how to collaborate with them as they use the space. In parallel, my studio works share some of these goals, but often employ very different tools and intentions. I look to bring a viewer into a unique world with a language that may be new and invented, less recognizable as a world you know, but accessible through observation and perhaps more interpretation. The goal is not as much to teach, but to tell. Telling a story of understanding through reinvention, remixing, reshaping for the purpose of sharing my unique experience as a thinker, a maker, and a human being. It is a space to seek understanding through action and interpretation of new knowledge. It's very active for me, but yet often more passive for the viewer. It's a more private space. The viewer remains on the outside, and the engagement relies more on the viewer's willingness to seek access to the work. Uh, in my studio practice, I look to use making as a way of understanding, taking big ideas, researching, synthesizing, and then making them visible as ways to understand and internalize new knowledge. In both practices, materials play a significant role in how the content comes to life. Material, surface, color, form are all tools I use to invite a viewer in to occupy and sort of share that space with me, or in another sense, to invite a viewer in to build a relationship with the work, to witness a process of unpacking, defining, and maybe representing. I love materials and the manipulation of matter to make it into something new, something known or mysterious, something surprising, or something perhaps almost known. Recently, I've developed a real renewed interest in science, physics and space in particular. I like to think about the scale of time and distance and the vast amount of unknown yet to be discovered. I find it strangely comforting to think about these things that are too large to really understand and still very, very theoretical in many ways, and are not yet able to be measured or observed. I find there's a lot of interesting ideas in physics in particular that are uniquely analogous to our experience as human beings and can create really strange connections within the work. The way a person can eclipse other people in a space, the way unseen forces often reveal themselves only through their influences on objects that are in their proximity. A lot of science based art often deals with representation of a thing. I've been playing around a lot in this area and find myself more interested in trying to make someone feel the thing rather than see an artistic version of the thing. Um, this is where I guess the two practices of design and art are starting to merge in this intention to direct a specific experience for a viewer and have them come away with an understanding of an idea or perhaps a deeper understanding of their experience with it. Interested in time and how time and duration can be a tool to create shared experiences. Recent work in my studio is getting automated, and I'm starting to build these machines and look to develop interpretive objects that allow a viewer to experience a relationship with something that's really, really far away and is moving at a completely different speed and has a very different relationship to our body and our time. Um, I'm working on these time based works that will perform a specific set of actions and demarcate an amount of time set by the viewer. I want to slow the viewer's time down and make tangible this passage of time in ways that inspire reflection and maybe help us comprehend other timescales beyond the subjective experience. What we looked at in this image is a still in progress piece that would have a motorized mount that would move this object in relationship to a celestial object at the speed at which that object would be traveling across our hemisphere. The machine would be able to find and track that object daily. And so when the object leaves our hemisphere, the machine would go to a rest position and wait for that object to come up again. And so again, moving at the speed of the Earth as it travels through space, as the viewer watches this thing slowly turn in their presence. Some more recent work, I'm thinking about clocks. I'm thinking about these time-based works that where a viewer can set the duration of time and actually sort of witness this transformation over the period of time. I don't really know how I'm going to make some of these things. I'm not a programmer, nor have I worked in the realm of building these machines, but it's a new branch of my work that's pretty exciting. It feels strange to be out of my element in this way. I sort of always thought I challenged myself with new work, but maybe I was challenging myself in my comfort zone, but with materials that were different in some way. The technical side of this new work is kind of unsettling. It's I'm learning all these new things that I never expected I would be working in, but it's very exciting and is going to lead to a lot of new growth. With that, I'd like to transition over to the studio. Welcome to my quarantine studio. What we're looking at here is a whole bunch of recent work, all work that I've been producing since probably January. Maquettes, models, lots of drawing. If you recall the image that we sort of ended with in the last presentation, what we're looking at here is the maquette for that piece. Imagine each of these discs turning independently, completing a full rotation over the course of a predetermined amount of time that the viewer would be able to select. The idea here is to allow a viewer to really experience this subjective model of time as we experience it specifically in relationship to other objects. I work with drawing quite a bit in my practice. I like to work large, I like to work small. Drawing has always been a part of both my design and studio practice. Everything that we're looking at here would be more studio-based work, thinking a lot about celestial relationships, about gravitational fields, about the influence of objects on other objects, working large, working small, oftentimes working on dark fields with lighter line weight and light lines over that surface. I really like to work with a wide range of materials in my studio, and so you'll see, through a lot of these models and maquettes, some of that influence coming into play. As I move through the space, you're going to see a variety of scales of work. The piece that we're looking at here on the back wall is another one of the time-based pieces. And so if you can imagine each of these discs moving in an independent way over the course of a period of predetermined time. One disc may make 13 rotations during that time. Another disc might make 3. Another disc might make 1. But all of them ending in a synchronized action with the piece closing in on itself and all of those discs sort of stacking in alignment. The idea is to use this sort of celestial rotation, similar to like what you might see in a planetary orrery, to sort of, again, track the user's experience of time and really invite a visitor or a viewer to sort of slow down and witness this passage and sort of feel it in a different way. A lot of new technology to me and programming in this project. But as I said, it really is expanding my practice quite a bit and bringing me into new areas of work that I may not have anticipated originally. The studio is a space of contemplation. It's a space that I surround myself with my work and really use it as an environment to help shape the thinking that goes into all of this work. I thank you very much for coming and hearing this talk. I thank you for participating in the Benton exhibit, and I hope that you have a good day. All right, we're recording.
Hi, I am Shelby Charlesworth. I am a third-year graduate student at the University of Connecticut, and I'm here to interview Christopher Sancomb and have some dialogue about his work. He is an industrial design instructor at the school, and we're here talking about his industrial design work as well as his studio practice. So I guess I can just jump straight into this here. So I'm curious, is knowing about or viewing the interactions of your viewers with your work important to you?
On both sides of the practice, absolutely. And I think, the design practice changed the way that I think about viewer interaction with my art over time. It became more important to me and had a different kind of value to build a relationship with a viewer and see that relationship kind of grow and flourish maybe within a larger body of work. Like throughout an exhibition of studio work, of sculptural work or installation, being present with viewers, not just at an opening, but being present at other times, not performing, but watching and kind of just seeing how people move through a space and experience the work. A lot of some of the ideas in exhibit design factor into the way that you set up a show, thinking about sequence, thinking about a positioning of an object in a room, how a viewer approaches an object, what their first sight is of that thing, and how they can move around it, how you can invite a viewer into moving around an object, or even reward them for it. So that's something that's definitely informed the way that I think about that relationship. Um, the museum work, of course, the type of museum work that I've done really requires all of that. It wants viewers and visitors to move into a space, make that space their own, with some guidance on how to feel and how to act in certain spaces. Putting a really rowdy, loud activity next to a really quiet and thoughtful activity, you want to be mindful of those relationships, and so it works in both sides.
Awesome. And I guess you kind of answered my next question a little bit too, just stating that your industrial design work is largely driven by social interaction. And I was going to ask if it's the same for your studio practice as well. So it seems like that's definitely true for that as well.
Yeah, to a certain degree, definitely. It's becoming more important. I think in the past, some of the work was more passive. It told its own story and it sort of left there. But I think the way that I think about work now, particularly some of the kinetic pieces, it's prolonged engagement with a viewer. So, yeah.
And I was watching one particular part of your video that I really enjoyed. When you say that you're trying to create something that helps the viewer feel the thing rather than see it, would you say that your work is based around experience and interpretation rather than representing the recognizable?
Yeah, I would say more about experience and interpretation. I think the recognizable can be an entry point, both in both of those two worlds. Um, I think the interpretation part is finding your way in, finding a language that maybe we share, maybe you don't recognize, but you want to learn. Finding access to the work.
Let's see. Oh,
All right, we're recording.
so my next question, I'm just curious about if you have a background in the sciences, since you seem to have this interest in science, and what drew, or sorry, did art draw you towards science, or was it the other way around, or was this something that already existed for you?
I think it's a renewed interest in science that largely because I just started discovering, I've always liked big questions in my studio practice. It's sort of a place to think about big ideas and to use the work as a way to sort of understand and understand through making and understand through action. Um, I like research. I like thinking, a lot about the sort of research and synthesizing that into manifestations of some of those ideas. And uh, I find a lot of comfort in some of the really disconcerting sort of scales of time. And and I was reading today about like Stephen Hawking and some of the ideas that he presented 15, 20 years ago. And it's just fascinating to think about ways to try to bring some of those ideas that are not observable, they're not necessarily even proven or possible to be proven, but they're fun to think about and they're fun to think around, and maybe think about how you could bring that to a viewer and begin a conversation about it.
All right. So, has your interest in science informed the expansion of your material language?
Definitely. I mean, it's, a lot of I think one of the things that I said in my video was I was thinking about ways to not just represent an idea, but to have it embody that idea. And that has brought me into thinking about things that move.
Mhm.
And I have not built a lot of things that move, and I'm not a programmer. I've done a lot of fabrication, but I haven't done gearing. I haven't done a lot with motors and so on. And so it's very much required me to expand my practice into an area that I've not worked in.
Mhm.
and it's challenging. It was surprising how much discomfort I initially felt when I was like, this feels so foreign. Why does it feel so foreign? And it made me think about the way that I work and what I like to work in, and how I challenge myself in the work. And so it's been an exciting sort of expansion, largely because of the content that I want to try and tackle.
Mm-hmm. Let's see where. Um, so I was looking at the new project that you had proposed, and I saw that it was kind of set up in like a mock-up in a gallery. Does your work typically exist inside of a gallery, or have you displayed any of these works elsewhere? Yeah, I think that's it.
I mean, I've shown sculpture in galleries, and I've shown it in outdoor exhibitions and different types of installation environments. Um, that's not as much what interests me now.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather see, I'd rather be working and having things in uh, like a science museum,
Yeah.
or a museum that, or a space that's going to access people that may be coming there for art, but may also be coming there for a whole variety of other reasons. Um, I want to expand the audience, not for numbers, but for, conversation. A couple of years ago, I was doing an installation in an arboretum, and everyone who was stopping by was asking me what I was doing, and they were not necessarily there to see art. They were there to see trees and flowers and plants. And so our conversations varied so broadly that I really enjoyed that public engagement. And a lot of interesting things came out of that. I had folks that stopped by that day that took photos and then emailed me the photos. And then we had these kind of ongoing conversations. They went back to see the work later. And that relationship existed totally outside of a gallery, but more in a sort of cultural institution that brought in a larger audience, a different audience. So I like that. I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, and I don't know that this is necessarily a question, but more just conversation. Even just viewing the mock-up of that piece and imagining how it would exist in a gallery, of this thing that is watching something that exists beyond the walls of that gallery is really interesting to me too, where it's just kind of ignoring whoever is looking at it. It's disinterested in the viewer. But I think that's, yeah, really interesting and could definitely exist outside of a gallery as well.
One of the technical aspects of that piece is that it would work best outside because it relies on visual orientation to some cardinal objects in the sky, so it knows where it is. So one of the key points of that machine is it would have a GPS, but it also needs to know where in the sky it's actually pointing. And so, with a motorized telescope, you would have to orient it to maybe say 3 stars and build a triangle. And now this machine knows where it is, and it can continually follow an object, and then return, and it knows where it is the next day and the next day. That's much harder inside, when I can't see, outside. So ideally, that would be in a space where it could be outside, and operating, safely around people, but continually sort of reconnecting with its, sort of host.
Um, are you finding that your interest in science kind of finds its way into your teaching practice as well when you're teaching industrial design, or does that stick strictly more so to the industrial design side of things?
No, I'm very interested in the interdisciplinary in the classroom as well, and I am very hopeful to get more scientists and science students into the classroom. Currently I have students that are in business, that are in engineering, and in studio arts, and not only does it bring an interesting conversation into the classroom, but diverse thinkers. And so I'm working on a collaborative team at UConn to develop a solar project, an outdoor solar project, and seeing all the different ways that we work, seeing the different professional sort of values and professional processes that exist within these disciplines is always interesting to learn more about it, but also to reflect on your own practice and what are the systems that we use to build our work? How do we think about artistic research or design research in relationship to research in the humanities or research in the sciences, which are sometimes more traditionally represented in academic environments.
Mhm.
Um, so I want to sort of help represent that in the design classroom and the studio classroom.
I think that that allows for more networking amongst the different departments as well, and just would, I would imagine, create more conversation amongst students and maybe remove that intimidation of entering other areas of the university for research as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, and one of my last questions for you, just thinking about where we are right now in this world, I want to know how your studio practice has changed and shifted throughout the pandemic with COVID happening.
So I've found I have to be very patient because I don't have all the access that I want to the people and the minds that I need to sort of collaborate with, and all the things that I need. Equipment in particular and space is more challenging. So it's this is where the design side of thinking comes in, because we're always thinking about adaptability and flexibility and resourcefulness, both within studio arts but also in a design practice. And so this is a time for all of those things, where I shifted to doing a lot of really small drawings, and so feeling very productive, working on a very manageable scale, finding more sort of joy and benefits out of this in a way that I hadn't necessarily foreseen. It was sort of, I need to do something to satisfy this and keep moving forward, and yet suddenly it becomes this little branching, thing that happens and is really flourishing. And so there are the silver lining moments, of being forced into new ways of working. So
Hmm.
I think that's kind of a positive that's come out of this. Certainly, there's more. Well, I won't say more time to focus necessarily, but it seems like the time that is there is more focused.
Yeah, and even just seeing that you are making a lot of work based around time and the constructs of time and like how we have manufactured time right now is really interesting as well. And I imagine that this gives you a lot more opportunity to think about that, or allows you to think about it a little bit differently as well.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I started doing some stop motion things with some of the models that I have in the studio, because they're not mechanized yet, but I want to have a moving representation of them. And so starting to work out systems of measurement where I can move any one of the, say, 6 or 12 discs that are mounted on either of these sort of time-based pieces, in different increments, and start to illustrate through stop motion photography how they may move. And so that sort of, it's buying me time. It's creating, I could do animations digitally probably, but I'm a little more interested in trying to try the stop motion, even if I'm passing through occasionally some of the images. Um, I think that would be more of an engaged representation than if I just did an animation, a digital animation or something like that. But when I'm able to, I can share that with someone who can be like, yeah, I think I have an idea of how we can make this move.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. And that's all the questions I have for you.
Thank you very much, Shelby. I enjoyed talking with you, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right.